to...
Yes,
Welcome
I'm on.
back.
Hello.
Hi. We're at FreedoniaCon 2025. This is British Joel, in case you don't know him yet. And you're going to teach us some Victorian baking today, correct?
That is the plan, though I will state I put this recipe together fairly quickly and I'm making this up as I go along. But we shall see how it
I
goes.
know you're in
It's a
the
fairly
SCA. Whoa. I know you're in the SCA. Where is your research? I would like to see your papers, sir.
My papers are this, which once we get to a little later stage, I will talk through a bit more. Because
Oh,
this
okay.
is Mrs. Beaton's Household Management,
Oh.
which is a Victorian cookbook. This edition belongs to a very good friend who sadly wouldn't become my show and tell for the Cobos versus Cockneys later because she is a Cockney. But this is a 1906 edition of the book,
Oh.
which hopefully you can see somewhat there. That date at the bottom says 1906. So while the book at that edition isn't Victorian, the book definitely is,
I wanted you to
and it's
know.
quite interesting.
I knew he would have sources. It's that SCA
Oh,
thing. They always have sources. I'm telling you right now, it's a thing.
it is. So I'm actually cheating slightly. The recipe I'm doing isn't in my edition of Mrs. Beaton's, but is from a Mrs. Beaton's because I wanted to cook scones so that I could eat them later. And possibly illustrate another point of British culture because that's what I do. So, baking. Obviously, this is my kitchen. It is not Victorian, so I apologise that I'm not using the authentic tools. But I will attempt to be as authentic as possible. Bear with me a moment, I just need to get something up on a screen so that I can see what is going on, and more importantly, have my recipe. I will show my sources because I'm a good researcher, and as Andy says, yeah, I'm in the SCA and we believe in that sort of thing.
So while you're looking, what type of scones are we making? Because I know there are different types of scones.
They are going to be sultana scones. Or scones, which is my preferred pronunciation. So first case in point, British accents, British pronunciations. It's spelled Scone. I suspect it is from Scotland, so it is possibly scone. The stone of scone is probably the original pronunciation. However, if you are posh in British, so 1879 terms, social class 4 or above, you should probably pronounce it scone with a long O. And if you are lower class, definitely. And definitely if you're northern, it's scone, as in the world's fastest cake. So there, this is a recipe that actually looks a lot like a biscuit recipe, an American biscuit recipe, because of some of the stuff. So as said, bear with me. It's sort of my first time doing this. We'll have some fun. The ingredients. I've put the link in the chat, so which I possibly should have done hours ago, so people could have baked along. But we're not going there. The actual recipe is from an earlier.
I was going to say we are recording, and it's hopefully going to go up on YouTube, so they can always rewatch it and bake with you.
So the recipe comes from an early edition of Mrs. Beaton. The website that I've linked is someone's cookery website that I'm borrowing it off because they've done some of the workings out of the recipe. And it's actually one that was included on a handwritten note in early editions of the book, tucked in. So we presume by Mrs. Beaton or Mr. Beaton's handwriting in the book, and it took a little bit of translation on their part. So thankfully they've done that for us. But we have a nice, simple recipe. My fridge.
And while you're doing that, the sultanas, that's basically like golden raisins, right? For Americans.
Golden raisins. Yeah. I
Because
believe the exact difference is they are the same thing. They are grapes that are dried. Raisins are done with seeded grapes. Sultanas are seedless, I believe, is the difference.
I don't think any of our raisins have seeds, but there are
Yeah,
dark raisins and golden raisins. So I was thinking that these were
yeah.
the
A golden
golden
raisin
ones.
would be we'd probably call a sultana, and
Yeah.
it may be colour of grape, but like a big bag of sultanas more than I'm going to need. So recipes: got some flour, got butter, caster sugar. Because I'm fancy, we keep vanilla in our caster sugar to add to the flavour. Sultanas, a pinch of baking soda, and a bit of cream of tartar, which are two basically baking powder to help it rise, because this is before the days of self-raising flour, which we have this side of the Atlantic. I know it's less of a thing in America, and buttermilk, which took me slightly by surprise because normally a scone recipe has eggs in it and a bit of milk as the binding agent. And thus, I think it's sort of going to end up being something more like a sweet biscuit for Americans. But we shall see. And it is indeed best served with clotted cream and jam, which we have. And while I'm probably going to have them, they may be cooling at that point. There may be a brief aside in Cockneys and Cowboys about the proper serving of scones.
Fine, but only if I get to talk about the proper etiquette of cowboy hats.
That's perfectly reasonable. Sounds like a deal. So, over this side of my kitchen, I purchased a new webcam today just for this sort of thing. I have a selection of my ingredients and a relatively plausible to be Victorian era, at least by design, the design would have existed, set of scales. So I'll be measuring in imperial measurements, or freedom units, as some people call them. So some of this will require a little bit of conversion on my part. Okay. Okay, so we have a bowl, have a sieve, because I want it to rise a little. Should have enough butter there. So, firstly, flour. Of course, I'm pouring it off camera, so it's not as dramatic. Do this one-handed. Doesn't move, doesn't move, doesn't move, and then it does, which is nice. It is a very low-fat recipe, with some only requiring about 50 grams of butter. Which is about what I've got. It suggests using room temperature butter, which makes it different from a pastry recipe where you would want cold butter.
That's a thing.
It says hands, cut full things. Given I'm about to do rubbing in, I am just going to break it into small pieces. Obviously, if I was doing this truly in Victorian, I'd be the head chef and I'd be standing here telling my servants how to do it. Or, the household cook. A writer and a administrator in life. I probably counted middle class enough to have servants. Um, those days are long gone.
I keep hoping for them to come back. I could totally use some servants.
As long as they're well paid and well treated, I'm okay with it.
Well, heck yeah. You think I would have anything less than well paid and well treated? Please.
I'm
I'm just not
gonna
rich
plead
enough
the
to have well paid and well treated. Everyone, please go and buy Fossil products so that I can get well paid and well treated servants. Please. That's how that works, right, Joel?
In fact, that's the goal of capitalism, I believe.
I do enjoy being a capitalist pig. It's a thing.
So currently, I'm not showing you this because I'm needing both hands for it. I'm rubbing the butter into the flour.
Like actually
Which
between
is a
your
lot.
fingers rubbing it to combine.
Yeah,
Which is very different than like cookie baking where you cream the sugar and butter together first.
yeah. Cakes you would often do. So you'd cream the butter and the sugar together, add a lot more of the wet ingredients, and do that. This is very much add all the dry ingredients. I note from this recipe that I have strict measurements of everything except for sultanas. So, for rules wise out there, this recipe is the perfect way to make your gaming group eat an infinite amount of sultanas.
So, out of curiosity, have you tried it with things other than like sultanas? Does the
I
base recipe work elsewhere?
I believe the base recipe should work elsewhere. I haven't, I have literally never used this specific recipe before. Recipes for scones I have done in the past I've done plain scones, I've done sultana scones, and I've done savoury cheese scones, which are very nice.
They sound nice.
Where you basically use a good sharp cheddar cheese,
Some garlic.
something nice, something in the sharp hard cheese in there. Maybe a bit of sprinkling of cheese on the top as you bake it. Um, Really nice with like a chili jam or something spread on it. Um, Sultana scones or cherry scones are more common, because I'm the only person in this household who likes savoury scones. So if scones do get baked, they've usually got some sort of dried fruit in it. Right, I'm fairly comfortable that bowl of flour now mostly looks like a bowl of flour, given I'm putting 500 or 50 grams of butter into 500 grams of flour, or thereabouts.
And now make that into cups.
Well, now I'll wash my hands so I do not get flour and butter and everything. Work out where I've put the tea towel.
See, if things are in cups, then us silly Americans know how to do it.
Yeah, so one tea towel, not Victorian, but quite a nice tea towel. Apparently, our calendar is being censored because our calendar is medieval and rude. Not safe for work, apparently. It is a picture of entirely accurately drawn medieval penises.
Penises have been drawn throughout the ages. It's a whole thing.
They have.
Greeks and Romans, penises. Cavemen.
Pilgrim badges. Pilgrim badges are where it's at.
I was actually watching this thing on their Viking art, and some of the Viking drawn pictures have penises and some don't. And there was a big discussion on whether that just made you more important, or maybe the ones that didn't have penises were women. And they seem to settle on the more important you are, the more likely you were to have a penis. Because, you get the extra details.
Unfortunately, due to sexism, maybe it's the other way around.
You know?
The more you have a penis, the more likely you are to be. The easier it is to become important. That might be controversial, I guess.
But I just found it utterly amusing that it doesn't seem to matter what time period somebody drew some damn penises.
Yeah.
Michelle hiding from us. Hi, Michelle.
She is. We're 100% badges that you collected by going and visiting important sites, holy sites, were to a worrying degree likely to be some form of pewter penis. But yeah, that's not baking. That's not even Victorian. So I'm not sure I'm going there. But
I just figured that given we're being recorded, it wasn't safe for work. If it's, people are watching it maybe at like work or something.
yeah, but now we're going to roll back to the start and look
Look.
at what it is.
When I put them up on YouTube, it asked, "Was this created for children?" I'm like, "No, fuck off." So,
by children, maybe.
well, yeah, maybe childish for sure, but for children, nah.
I'll now proceed to add it into the magic sultanas.
What are you adding in?
The sultanas. I'm going to weigh them out. So I'm going to put
in this the raisins. Yeah.
Have you shown them our very imperial scales?
I have pointed the camera to everything.
Mm-hmm.
Very inexact measurement for the sultanas. I'm going to stir them through and just see how it looks.
That sounds like a correct way to do things.
That's certain, fruit density. So this hair bowl, I will now bring over.
I would think any of your dried fruits would be good. So like apricots, maybe.
They would be good. Obviously, you want to chop them up chunks wise. Not so much scones, but apples are really good. I really like apples and stuff. I'm trying to make anyone seasick. I'm pointed at that. I think.
All right.
I think I want a little bit more sultana in that.
Okay.
One minute the bowl. Oh well.
Apparently, you need to make a second batch with cherries. I'm just suggesting strongly that if you want to not be killed in your sleep, you have to make a second batch with cherries.
I would need some cherries. Somebody need to go out and buy some cherries then. And some more flour.
Wait, you don't have a 50-pound bag of flour downstairs?
I do not.
What? You Brits are crazy. How you live like that?
Yeah, but you live like 2,000 miles from any shops.
That's
so
true.
You need to buy them.
It's true.
You're better prepared for the apocalypse than us too. So
I am actually. I keep rice and flour and dried beans because I might get stuck on the hill for 3 days.
Our dried ingredients in a bowl. So that stage, it's me putting something away and showing my T-shirt.
It's a nice T-shirt. I was going to say we're looking at your tits, but that would be rude.
It is ukulele orchestra of Great Britain, Britain's best ukulele orchestra.
Is there really such a thing as the best ukulele orchestra? I'm just gonna.
They're very good and very funny and good versions. A whole bunch of very good songs. I've seen them live a couple of times. Their version of Kate Bush's "Wuthering Heights" is seminal because it's done in proper Yorkshire dialect. Right. The recipe says 250 mils of buttermilk, and it comes in a 300 ml pot with the recipe and a little extra just to help it bind. So
pour that whole thing in.
I'm probably going to end up pouring the whole thing in, getting it mixed in. Once it's into a dough, there's some kneading, which is slightly unusual in the scone recipe, but I'm making a small amount of mess.
See, this is where my greater American, I have power tools. I have kitchen power tools. It include having a kneading hook on it. Mixer.
You may note from my kitchen, it is a perfectly good and very serviceable kitchen. The still remains the one piece of moment in my life where I felt like an actual grown adult.
I love your kitchen, but I have noticed that British kitchens tend to be smaller than American kitchens.
Well, it's a lot less Britain than there is America. There's the problem. And it is just space as much as anything.
Yeah, and I know that a lot of the buildings they retrofitted certain things. So like washers and dryers are often in kitchens and are often like stackable ones to save space and
Yep,
room, and because that's where the
yep,
water runs into the house.
yep. There is indeed, in the corner behind me, there is indeed our washer dryer.
See, I know my Brits, but you know what the best thing about the Brits are? They're not
Yeah,
afraid to paint their house, the inside of their houses, colors. Like
yeah.
Americans tend to everything's freaking beige if you let them. It's boring, eggshell everywhere. But the
Up until
Brits
recently,
color. I love it.
our living room was the colour we call over here magnolia, which is a white with a tiny hint of a beigeish pink,
Mhm.
which is the sort of standard. You want to sell your house and not offend anyone
Yeah,
colour. Our
boring.
living room is a more interesting, sort of greeny blue colour.
Okay. I can't watch it right now, but eventually I have to watch this video on Wuthering Heights music video, the Ukulele Orchestra of Great Britain. Right now we're recording, so later. Mellow Sage. All right. I like that. That's kind of a good color. I like it. I have yet to paint my office, so it is a very pale bluish color with a cream ceiling. Whoever had this house before painted all of the ceilings with a flat cream, which is just atrocious. You don't use flat paints on ceilings unless you have like vaulted ceilings. And the cream is just ugly and it eats the light. And so I will be repainting the ceiling silver and shiny. But the walls have got to be a more brighter color, I think, for me.
Right. And at the kneading stage, it is going together into a
Did you?
dryish dough. What an after.
So is the dough very dry or is it when you're done? Well, you'll show us,
It
right?
shouldn't be. It shouldn't be very dry. It is sort of going together gradually. It's just sort of picking everything up and letting the moisture sort of spread through it. I'm probably working the very limits of my mixing bowl in size. I don't want to overwork it because I'm after scone, not bread.
So how do you know like so I know with brownies, you don't want to stir them too much or you get a cake consistency. So how do you
Yeah.
know with scones when to quit?
To be honest, most scone recipes you sort of mix up and then roll and go from there. I would say the point you know when to quit is you're trying to avoid developing the gluten like bread. So you still want it fairly crumbly. So just about holding together is what I'm aiming for.
Okay.
And we're getting just about holding together. So you want it to be a crumbly, oh yeah, almost biscuity texture. Pull some extra mixture that is tried to escape. Once these are in the oven, my plan is entirely to start showing you some of the wonders that is Mrs. Beaton while things cook. Um, so I'm thinking that is about there. Some of the sultanas are falling out. I'll put my bowl over here. To wash my hands so I can safely handle my webcam.
Oh, come on. The webcam wants to be covered in dough. I'm sure of it.
I do not want to have a clean dough off a webcam. That's my rules. So what we ended up with is a big ball of dough.
Okay.
on my work surface. Be a little bit more tidying of stuff away. See how I don't use the bad words.
Lots of sultanas / raisins.
Yep. So now we get to do the plating game. As I cut. Let's see. Maybe a clever Joel. That's some bananas. Because we do have fruit in this country. Oh look, I can actually go here with my work surface. So it recommends cutting it in half. Working with half, which given the amount of it, I'm completely down with. I'm aiming for sort of a sausage shape.
So speaking of shapes,
Very,
a lot of times in the US we see scones that are kind of triangles. Is there a
yep.
proper traditional shape?
I would be tempted to say round. I think these are going to turn out as more irregular than some scones, because a lot of scone recipes, other more modern scone recipes, you tend to use like a biscuit cutter, cookie cutter to shape it, whereas this says roll it out into a sausage and then cut that sausage into bits and then put on the tray. Which reminds me of a stage that I should have done earlier.
That sort of shape.
Yeah, that's the usual sort of cookie shape. And I'm about similar diameter, but I'm going with what the recipe says, which is cutting it. But before I get to that, I'm going to be good and grease my baking tray, so we don't get scones sticking on it. Yeah.
Sticky scones would be bad.
Yeah. I still eat well, but
It's not available.
other shapes are available indeed. So
Thank you, Birdman. Wait.
that really wouldn't like the scones. There's too much, maybe too much rice in them. So, one greased baking tray, baking sheet.
See, I would have probably used parchment paper.
I considered it. I've got some, but
I'm very
playing.
fond of parchment paper for baking. I'll just be honest. Easy to clean up, nothing sticks. Gives you even
So
baking
I'm
on your
just
cookies.
shaping them. Shaping them into basically rough rounds.
But these went together really quick.
Yeah, I was aiming for something. I've got an hour, so I figured, they're going to take about 20 minutes to bake. So we're currently nicely on schedule, as it were. Bring out my second half of dough. I look at my size of tray and go, with those size scones, I may require a second tray for the last couple. I would state that unlike some sweet recipes, this is probably not a great eating raw biscuit thing. I suspect there's not quite enough flour in it, not quite enough sugar in it to make that work, but
I was going to say, was there sugar added? I remember butter
yeah,
and flour.
There's about 30 grams, so about an ounce, just over a generous ounce of caster sugar.
And now castor sugar is like regular or like powdered sugar?
Somewhere between granulated and powder.
Okay.
To be, super helpful there.
No, because there are different types of sugar.
Yeah,
Traditionally
it's
in the
not.
US, you have brown, which is not as brown as it used to be. So I make my own at this point. White, granulated,
Yeah.
powdered. You can get specialty sugars. It's just harder.
Brown food runs into a complicated, depending on what it is, but tends to be where it has distinct grains, tends to be bigger distinct grains.
So if you were giving advice and the person only has granulated or powdered, which one would you suggest?
I would use granulated because powdered sugar does weird things with the actual sort of measurements,
Okay.
which is icing sugar because it's so fine.
Yes.
And particularly if you're measuring via volume, like cups or spoonfuls, you will get more in that space.
Yes. You can sift it, but it's a pain in the ass.
So caster sugar is somewhere between the two. It's finely ground sugar and is very good for baking because it spreads evenly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's traditional. We keep, as I said, we keep a couple of sticks of vanilla hidden in our caster sugar somewhere. You can sort of see that is the end of the vanilla pod. Because one of the main uses of caster sugar is putting on strawberries. It's also the preferred, it's also the preferred sugar for making meringue with.
All right, that makes sense.
Because again, the fineness really works for you. So, a little bit of shaking and pushing down. We have a couple of trays. Of hopefully tasty scones. And they're not sticking on there, which is good. That means it's well greased. I've had the oven warming for a little while. The oven is on my standard. I don't know what I need, so I'll put it on 180. My trays are a little big, so I'll put those in there. And they should take about 20 minutes to bake, supposedly. Let's shift some things around. Do a little bit of wiping up.
It seems like it's a very good, easy to replicate recipe.
Yeah, scones in general are a good, easy recipe. I first cooked scones in a cookery class at school because they're one of those. It's simple, it's tasty. There's a lot of variants you can do, so it's easy for people to find ones they'll actually eat and like.
You
So
need
sort
to
of I have
post. You need to post that cheese garlic one.
I have a fun cheesy scone recipe.
Yeah.
I will in fact try and find a decent scone recipe that's online. My instinct suggests search Delia Smith scone, and it will probably give you all the variants you could possibly want.
We expect you to post the link later.
We'll see what I can do. So, while those are baking, Mrs. Beaton. So, Mrs. Beaton was a young lady and writer who decided to write a book called Mrs. Beaton's Household Management. This is not the first cookbook, and it's something more than a cookbook. I don't know how readable that is, but there are many chapters, and it is not just about how to cook and how to run a kitchen. It's actually literally about how to run a household. So, for young ladies who are getting married and who haven't been properly educated on it, it has everything from recipes and how to cook them through to how to do things. It has an entire chapter. That's the chapter of the housekeeper, which I presume about cleaning. It has chapters on domestic servants and their duties, household recipes. It has medical chapters. It has homeopathic medicine, which at this time period will have been sold as being more scientific than other medicine because it's always tried to be counterculture. There is matters on how to make menus and that sort of thing. There is foreign cooking. We have German, Italian, Spanish, Jewish, Australian cookery. I think I might go and have a look at that one in a second. South African cookery and Indian cookery. So we're talking about here that he's drawing from the entirety of the empire. But it's also a full book. And look, yeah, it's this thick. It's got small writing. This is a big book. I had to pull up my Mrs. Beaton details earlier, but English journalist and editor, it tells me, Isabel Mary Beaton, born March 1836, died February 1865, so we are 160 years, pretty much last week, 2 weeks ago from her death, so consider the tradition. And the book was first published in 1857. So, and was getting regular details. So yeah, this is a 1906 one, is it almost, yeah, a book that was still being put, yeah, a cookbook and household book that is being published 60 years later, 50 years later. You can still get it in print these days, and it's worth it. It's just a huge book with lots and lots of things in it. And the basis of British cookery personalities, I would be tempted to say. It was the How to Eat the Domestic Gossip of Your Day. Oh, marvellous. I open up the book, pull up an illustration, take it all out because it is a very old book. But there is a page on serviette ways of folding them for presenting them for your dinner parties. Because, you know, you don't want to just do the normal stuff. You want to do something much more interesting and be special. And it was avant-garde. There are recipes for all sorts in it. Australian cookery. The food supply of Australia is excellent and abundant. In the towns, the price of mutton varies from 3p to 4p per pound. Food has gone up. Yes, excellent. We have pictures. My able assistant upstairs, who was supposed to be doing, I thought was supposed to be doing calligraphy, is sending links. That's good. In fact, my multiple screens upstairs would be fine. I would know this, but
So you can get a modern copy of Mrs. Beaton's book of household management.
Yeah,
So it's a reprint,
I
paperback for
think
$15 on Amazon if anybody's interested.
yeah. We have suggested menus, and food and pricings and how much you should expect to pay for stuff. There's stuff about home brewing in here. There is everything you might need. The other thing it tells you is how recent a thing that inflation is, because this is a book where they don't change the prices that often, and you could comfortably go, we can print a copy every 10 years, and the prices we don't, we probably check the prices, but we don't need to keep changing them. Hunting down a particular recipe that is particularly famed in one of the bits of and yeah, I will say, this is the height of Victorian cookery. Has all sorts of toast with foie gras. I have not been able to sit down and read through every single recipe in this book. Just flick through when because there is almost too much stuff. But I'm just quickly looking. Sandwiches. does have a detailed and long thing. There is alleged to be a recipe in here for toast sandwiches, but it's not showing up under that name. Curses. A particularly good food for invalids. A piece of toast between two slices of bread. Very gentle on the stomach, apparently.
Sandwiches are named after the Earl of Sandwich, aren't they?
Yes, I'm going to say, the whole he invented sandwiches probably a bit far, but the Earl of Sandwich almost certainly popularized them because he couldn't be bothered to leave. The story goes, this is 1700s. I believe late 1700s. He was gambling and needed to eat, but had no interest in leaving the gambling table because I would presume he was either winning or he was starting to fall behind. So he needed to keep going, and he basically asked for them to bring him his roast beef between two pieces of bread. But there's plenty of historical evidence of people eating meat that way for thousands of years beforehand. However, nobody had named it at that point, and he did it, and so people went, "Oh, that's mighty convenient." And, a dissolute gambler and problem like that could be considered as a setter of fashion in those days. So there is legal matters that said about running the household. There are suggestions for how to do dinner parties, how much wine you should supply with each course. For notes of how much people drank in the past, please check the drinks bill after the signing of the Bill of Rights in America and the celebration for those parties, because it's, considering how many founding fathers are there, a truly scandalous amount of alcohol. But there is a selection here of legal memoranda. So this is a household guidebook. I'm trying to sort of show you a page here. There. I adjust, and I'm not one of nature's cameramen. Death registration of. So this book teaches you how to make scones and biscuits and cakes, and also instructs you in what are the correct things to do should a member of your household, or we presume a guest, should die on your watch. To do it properly. So it is literally everything you need to know, which is kind of frighteningly detailed. There is a whole load of homeopathic remedies to make it home. Diseases of childhood, whooping cough, worms, quarantine. How nice. It's teething.
Etiquette was very important back then.
Incredibly so, and this is before food. This is before the internet. Nowadays, you're going to think, how do I do that thing? We look it up on the internet. Previously, you would have gone to it. You sort of see it as a literary trope. Much as I hate to sort of mention it or not, it's the one I know most people will know. There's a sequence in the Harry Potter books where they're trying to get rid of gnomes, and Mrs. Weasley goes and consults a household guide on the proper doing of it. And that's something of a harking back to a old way of doing things where a house would have a big book of how to do it. And almost certainly, if you're doing anything in the real world, or something close to the real world, the correct book for a lady to go and consult what is the way we do this thing within a household is going to be Mrs. Beaton's. I'm also pretty sure it's big enough to count as a club for damage purposes. I'm not sure I'd allow anyone to use forged weapon on it, but yeah, at the very least, we're looking strength plus 2 steps of damage for being clubbed by this thing, because we are literally talking. This is a cube, 6 inches thick. It's full of stuff. It's full of useful bits. Well, I'm getting nice smells coming out of the oven, which obviously you're not missed on. It has colour plates, various preparation and serving of fish there. Sole baked with force meat, which is essentially sausage meat. Many recipes. Wow, that's a lot of recipes for some. Snails with a piquant sauce. Thus refusing two myths about British food: that one, we only eat boring things, and two, we don't spice things. We only don't spice things since World War II. But there are a lot of I could do years of this. Several of them I did look at a couple of recipes and considered doing, but they required 2 hours in the fridge. Afterwards, I seriously considered cooking syllabub, which is whipped cream and alcohol, nominally as a dessert, more as a cocktail you need a spoon with. But there are recipes. There is general advice on how to do things. Making stocks, vegetarian soups. Because vegetarianism was a thing. Mostly crazy political people in those days.
I just came back to mostly politically crazy people. That's all the days.
That is all the days. Yeah, it's very cool again. But
It's never gone out of vogue.
no, it's completely. Oh, let's go. Unsteady cam again. Implements. So the top is a bread cutter. At the top, does not help that I have a window. At the top there, we have a bread cutter. The next layer is a coffee roaster. So this one here is essentially a thing you put the coffee beans in. It applies heat underneath them and keeps them moving so they don't stick and burn. Next to it is what I cannot help but call a hodder, which is a carpet sweeper, because that's the noise it sort of makes. It's kind of like the brush parts of a vacuum cleaner, but without the suction. And then, of course, we have possibly the more familiar mangles, a spice box down at the bottom corner, and a knife cleaner. Right. So that you can safely stick your knives in there and clean them without slicing your hands open. Or, so your servants can do that, because servants slicing their fingers open is expensive.
Yeah, we don't want that. They'll sue.
But we have a mention of freezing machines. They did keep it up to date. Obviously, 1879, we definitely had freezing machines. I have a whole list of opinions that I haven't gone into yet about matters of how the technology works home. Because, a good electrical... Look, there's a set of scales which, to be honest, is exactly the same mechanism as the one I was using. So at least that was appropriate. That's particularly handy. It is listed as an iron stock pot, but a large on the stovetop pot with its own tap that you can use to drain stock out of it as and when you want it.
I'm not sure I've ever seen one with its own tap in the US.
I've never... Literally, I'm just flicking through this book and finding interesting things, and that's there, and I go, I've never seen that. That would be so good, because given almost every stock recipe talks about skimming all the stuff off the top.
Right.
That's just, you can keep stock going on that, throw in your leftovers in it, keep it on the range, so it's always above that sort of magical 70 degrees C thing, just sitting there bubbling away at all times. And any time you need stock, you can pour it in. You're not having to skim it off the top because it's taking it from the bottom.
Well, there's things like risotto where you want the stock hot anyhow. That would be amazing.
Yeah, exactly. With pop it back there. I'll do a quick check in the oven. Possibly a quick switch around.
So yeah, how long were they supposed to be in the oven for?
about 20 minutes, so they're not going to be far off now. They are looking, the one tray's looking fairly convincing, the other tray's looking less so. I think they need a few more minutes. Yeah, they reckon they've had 18 minutes on that, because I have a timer on my cooker. Obviously, if I was Victorian, I'd have some sort of complicated clockwork contraption to do it for me. Yeah, we leave that to your weird scientists to have some fun with, and I hardly recommend it. But issues with their
See, that needs to be
how
a
to
full
swim
NPC.
a culinary engineer.
A weird scientist culinary expert. Huh. Guess what I found?
How,
I'm going to share it in the thing.
how to draw and pull a fowl, herbs and condiments.
Copy. Here we go. Because that looks like really darn close to what we were talking about. It's only a 5-gallon stainless steel stock pot with weldless
Yeah.
ball valve.
Yeah, that would be the trick. For wine, home brewing and winemaking as its current.
I mean,
What it was suggested uses. Yeah,
I'm not opposed to those. I learned how to
no,
make mead. I actually know how to make hard liquor because Missouri, it's legal to do that here. Gotta love that. Now, are you guys allowed to make your own hard liquor in England? I don't think you are.
I think you can, but if it's at all hinted you're doing something for at all commercial, you need to be careful.
So in the US, it's usually something along the lines of you can make it for your own personal use. You can't go over state lines with it, and you cannot even trade. Trading is commerce, and you're not allowed to do that. But your own personal use, it's a very big amount, and you have to sit there and be like, why did I need 5 gallons of fire water? Personal use.
Well, also cleaning engine blocks.
No. The engine blocks, you want what's called the head, which is the part you don't drink. It doesn't even taste good.
Yeah.
And that's what you want for that. Yes. Not that I know anything about this. I mean, we're going to rank this up with, what do you mean, do I have a cannon? I'm an American. Of course I have a cannon. It's just a tiny cannon. So how are our scones looking?
They're looking. I'm gonna have a quick look. I think they're looking reasonable.
I really like this segment. We should make you do it every year.
I'm going to give those a couple more minutes to the end, just to do that, because I think they're looking about there. They're looking nice and golden brown. Well, I'm endeavouring to pull out your tray to show my workings. Nothing has caught fire.
Yes, no catching fire bad. Oh, those look good.
Not sticking. Good. I think I want to give them just a little bit more. Just give them a bit more golden brown. And to make sure they're cooked in the middle. But they are looking, I think, for a first attempt at a recipe, I'm quite happy with how they've turned out. They're quite large, and me and Michelle will now be eating scones for the rest of the weekend. Oh no!
Oh, like that's such a chore. Except you have to make cherry ones next. I'm still working on that for you, Michelle. I got you.
That'll be the next thing.
We could make a 1879 cookbook. Look. I'll help with the American recipes. You help with the Brit recipes. We got this.
Yeah, the traditional thing to be serving this with is this. I'm going to open it. controversially, is clotted cream,
So what
which I believe
for Americans, what actually is clotted cream?
clotted cream is a very thick, very high fat content cream that it specifically comes from Devon and Cornwall, where you have very good cows, very good grass, and do that. However, it isn't just cream skimmed off the top of the milk. So it's not like, yeah, if you were to take what you guys would call heavy cream
Mm-hmm.
and then heating it in a water bath, yeah, as Michelle chairs happily for us. If you heat a basic water bath for a while, it'll cook out a bit and clot. So you get this very thick, very creamy cream that is ludicrously heavy. Quite hard to export because particularly it actually has a thing not for EU because it's done with very specific things and has odd foods, which make it hard to get in America. But essentially, if you were to take a decent amount of double cream, there are recipes online for being able to, yeah, this is how long you cook it for and what temperature. You're not looking at boiling temperature. You're looking at sort of, I think, 70, 80 degrees in an oven overnight type recipe. You might even be able to do it in a slow cooker. I'm just not sure. And then from there, you would skim off the bits of it that's thickening. I'm not sure what you do with any of the whey, as it were, that is left, but you basically pull off the clots. And you get this very, quite yellowy, buttery surface. And then underneath it's a very white, proper cream. But it's ludicrously rich. It's ludicrously lovely. It's very bad for you.
No, it's
So
good
yeah,
for you.
We'll
Very
keep
good
it
for you.
ourselves and focus on it.
So now with the clotted cream, do you add sweetener or flavorings to it, or is it just
No, you don't go. The heating process means it's a bit sweeter, which I think helps. What's more, I wonder why the half is sending us information. It heats, so you get some of the, because of the thickening, the natural sugars of the milk cook out a little. And sweeten it that way. But for this, you would serve it with jam. There is a great controversy of the order that you put things in. If you are from Devon and wrong,
damn Devon people.
you start with the butter because that's traditional. And anyone who claims that they're being clever by doing that is just trying to be third party and alternative. But you start with the butter, then you put the cream on, and then you put the jam on. But to my mind, the jam slides off the cream, and that's bad. And also, you can't get as much cream on because you've got the jam on top, which becomes very precarious. If you're in Cornwall, these are the two southwest most counties of England, where they're all a bit backwards and weird. Cornwall, they go butter, jam, cream. So you put a layer of butter on, you put some jam on, and then you create a nice cream hat for your scone, which is how we are likely to eat them, though I may be kind and prepare one in both ways. Do that. Right. I am looking at those scones. I'm looking at the clock.
And the clock says 2.
I am going to say, I think they may be ready.
Hopefully Brad doesn't kill us for going a little over.
It all kind of blends.
I was going to say, is Joel going to help you with yours?
He's welcome to stay. I just kind of planned on giving a general overview, and then I have my surprise, and then just kind of do an open Q&A.
All right.
But Joel can, of course, feel free to stay and provide commentary.
I certainly shall. I'm just going to put these on for a wire rack to cool because they are way too hot to eat at the moment, particularly because of the sultanas, which are essentially molten sugar at the moment.
Oh, I bet you dates would be good too.
Dates would be good. So, if you're using dates in cookery, we start moving into sticky toffee pudding, just distinctly not Victorian, in fact, quite modern. But we get into steamed puds and such. I shall turn off my oven. I shall say, this is the product of the last hour, which I don't think is all that bad considering
It's beautiful.
the first time making it, and I was doing it on camera, which I've never done before. So there we go. Every day's a school day, even a silly school day like this. Put the cream back in the fridge, and the jam back in the fridge for the moment. Shut that door and say, I think that is me done on this one. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Joel.
I will kill the camera
And
and
I
hide the
will-
kitchen from you.
I will say thank you again, and I'm going to go ahead and stop that stream so we can get ready for the 1879 stream.